is Joe Evinger.
You're going to try that again.
Okay. Hi, my name is Joe Evinger, and I help coordinate the Ashby Village Science and Ideas Group presentations. All of our members have varied educational work experience backgrounds, but we all share one thing in common, and that is science and new ideas. We currently have over 50 members in our group and another 50 people who pop in all the time. All are welcome to attend our presentations. We meet via Zoom on the second Thursday of every month, start at 3 o'clock, go until about 4:30. We have a different guest speaker each month who speaks on a topic related to science and ideas. And we rely on our group members, Arts and Culture Committee, Ashby Village members, invitees, presenters, and others for ideas about new speakers and ways to connect with them. Besides our presentation today, I am actively recruiting speakers who might speak to us in the coming months. Here are some upcoming topics. In June, we have the president of the SETI Institute, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, who will speak on the topic, the search for life beyond Earth, how it works, how it's going, and why it matters. In June, we're going to have the chief scientist with the Oceans Network of Canada, Victoria, and he's going to speak to us on mining, conservation, and bioprospecting as they square off interest in those areas, square off in the deep sea. In September, we're going to have a geologist specializes in volcanoes speak to us about super eruptions in Yellowstone Park and the possibility of one happening there again. In October, we have an anthropologist speaking to us for his third part of a presentation about ancient human dispersals out of Africa. And probably later this year, just sent out the email a few days ago, a different geologist hoping to get to speak to us about mass extinctions and ancient climate catastrophes. We'll find out maybe what happened to the dinosaurs. We invite everybody, all the Ashby Village members, to join our group, and any others interested, welcome to attend also. On to today. We are very fortunate to welcome Clayton Anderson. The title of his talk is Lake Merritt, a Green Refuge in the Heart of 450,000. Clayton Anderson is a naturalist working in the field of environmental education for the past 15 years. Enchanted by the natural world and its history since he was a boy, becoming a naturalist was a dream come true. After graduating from San Jose State University, he landed his first job as a naturalist with the Love Life Environmental Education Program. Since then, Clay has worked for several environmental concerns, including California State Parks, East Bay Regional Parks, Alameda Resource Conservation District. He currently works for the Golden Gate Audubon Society as youth program manager. When he is not introducing the youth to the magic of nature, he enjoys birding and creating art. Whether speaking through a microphone or painting with a brush, Clay loves his work and is always looking to promote and educate others about the wonders of the natural world and its cycle. And with that, I present to you Clayton or Clay Anderson.
Clay. Thank you, Joe. All right. Hello, everyone. And as I was telling Joe, if you have a question or anything, just bring it right up and we can deal with it freshly and at the present moment so that people can get their answers. All right, so I'm going to move ahead. Do I need to share my screen again, I guess?
Yes.
Okay, let me get out of here. And all right, here we go. Everybody see that?
We're good.
All right, so the natural history of Lake Merritt, and this is just my version of it, and I'm sure you guys have heard different versions, and there's so many people involved in this story. Lake Merritt has been around forever, of course, and it's just a little puddle in the scheme of geology. It's very small. It's not a big thing, but most of the geology that's associated with it is mostly in the Mesozoic, so recent geology, right? And basically, lake happens because, as you can read there, there's water that slides down or erodes these rides over the Franciscan complex and drops into a softer geologic body, which is quaternary sand. So Oakland and the downtown Oakland area is basically a hard form of sand. It's compacted. And that's probably why so many oaks were there when Western man started discovering the area. And there are millennia of Native Americans that have spent time on that land. You can see the pink QDS. Those are those hard sand deposits that came out of the drainages. One is the Oakland drainage. And you can kind of see, can everybody see my cursor?
Yes.
So here's the lake here in this schematic. Here's the lake here in this schematic. And then down here to the bottom left, here is the lake right here in this schematic. And you can see these pink bodies are actually compacted sand that have come off of these drainage systems. So this drainage system here, and this one comes out of creates San Leandro Bay, or backs up the water to make San Leandro Bay, and it comes out of the San Leandro Creek. And that goes on down the coast, the east shore. Hard packed sand that backs up, that comes out of these drainages and backs up the water, and the water finds another way around it. So that's basically what we're looking at, is these sands creating these backfills and creating these bays or inlets. That's the geologic story, all very young and fascinating stuff. And also this image up here is of the rock, the Franciscan Formation that creates Trestle Glen and all those areas up there above Lake Merritt, between Grand and Lakeshore. And there, here you can see down in here that this little circle here is one water drainage system. And what I teach the kids, it's called a watershed. I forgot my word, watershed. So the first folks, of course, everyone knows they're Ohlone. There are different bands of the Ohlone, and up to the left, I don't know if everybody can see it, but you can see the different major tribes that were recognized or subgroups in the Ohlone group. Rumsen was one, they're further south. The Muwekma is the new group that has formed because so many of the Native Americans have been scattered after the Holocaust, and they've found their way back to each other, and now they're calling them to order. In order to have a group or a body, they've decided to call themselves the Muwekma Ohlone. So this is the new group of Ohlones that are forming, and they have a website and they have information, and they're finding their way. If anybody says the word Huichin to you, they're not sneezing. They're actually saying the name or the Native American name of Oakland. So that way you can get a little information there on the Ohlone folks. They're still around, and they're still practicing their habits and their traditions as much as they can. And they haven't been recognized by the government yet, but they're working on that, and hopefully they'll get it soon. But they are still here, thank God. So, of course, that started to erode after the Spanish took over the West Coast. I forget the guy's name who came down on the horses and walked all the way down the coast and found San Francisco, and eventually founded the Presidio, which was the first settlement in the modern day Bay Area. I can't see my wording here. The head of Spain gave Don Luis Peralta, 4,400 acres of land. It's ridiculous. And he never lived on it. He lived down in San Jose, and he actually split it up between his sons. So it was always called, I've never seen it called anything else, Rancho del San Antonio. And that's the name of his third son. So apparently Antonio had the interest and he was the first person to move onto the property and settle. It was broken into four, and I can't remember the names of all the others, but they all got involved and developed the land, and actually they were ranchers basically. And according to wildlife experts or people who deal with wild places, the land was degraded. It was degraded by cattle, right? Because everybody wanted meat. But they lived a peaceful life. Most of these guys were through the military, and they got this land, and they just wanted to be at peace after the war or whatever. And so their sons, of course, were taught the ways of war, but most of them were ranchers. They ended up living very peaceful lives on, when you have 1,000, 2,000 acres to play with, you'd be pretty happy. So it was a pastoral life. They raised cattle and all the farm stuff that they did, which took out a lot of the native plants and animals that were originally here. And to my knowledge, there's no information about the plant sets that actually existed prior to Western man moving into the Bay Area. Nobody knows what those successional plants were, because once they put cattle on the land, that just wiped all of that stuff out. Non-natives came in and took over, and any natives that survived were kind of desperate and spread out, and that whole ecology was broken up. So we never will know what that is, but at some point, hopefully we'll get back to it. Anyway, so that was the Spanish influence. And then, of course, along came the gold rush, right? And the gold rush was pretty kind of like stepping on the gas. And things really sped up after that. And people started losing things and forgetting about stuff, and all kinds of new things came into being. And you have to realize, when people came across land, it was in a cart, on a train maybe, but it took them days to get here, and spent like their life savings to get here. Once they heard about the gold, people just spent whatever they had to get here to try to get some of that gold. 2/3 of those people never saw any gold at all, right? Hardly any of them were successful. So once they got here, where are they going to go, right? If you struck out, you're stuck. You're not going to be able to afford to get a boat back. You're not going to walk back across the Rocky Mountains. And so a lot of those people just kind of try to figure out a way to make it here once they were here. And you can see down below, is 1848, it was estimated there are approximately 157,000 people. Just 20 months, it soared to 100,000. This is just the immigrant population. And in 5 years, it was over 300,000. So all those people, and a lot of them being stranded, because now you're going to create a new situation. And all these people need to eat, and everybody needs to, get their needs met. So thus the beginning of California, modern day California. And I love this sign over here to the right. It says 200 jackasses on the trip. That was really funny. So a lot of these guys came, and here's 3 of these guys that came and didn't get what they thought they were going to get with the gold, but they had the skills to do something different. And 2 of these guys are lawyers, Moon, the one in the middle, and Carpenter on the right. Edson Adams was a business guy. And so they teamed up, and they were squatting. They actually squatted the waterfront of Oakland. And of course, at that time, well, let me go back. I forgot about down below right here, the Treaty of Hidalgo at the bottom, 1848, right? So the land was ceded back to over, or well, not back, but over to the United States. California went into American hands. And that was the beginning of the end for the Peraltas. And then when this came along, that just sped it up more. And so these guys squatted the waterfront of Oakland and drug the Peraltas through court. The Peraltas owned the land outright, but when it became American property, there was no respect for that. And they just kind of got steamrolled. They won some of the court battles, but overall, these guys were already on the property, and these guys were lawyers, so they knew how to go through the process. They were selling Peralta land before it was ever deeded to them. So, and Carpenter was the ringleader. He was very aggressive, and he made a lot of things happen. Over here, you can see one of the this green map shows you some of the parcels of Oakland back at the 1850, 1870, 60 mark. And a lot of these things happened very quickly. So the development of Oakland was doomed to go to business, and the whole waterfront was turned into a business. And so now today, we don't have a waterfront. Lake Merritt is it. And hopefully we'll eventually get back to it. But the way things set up at that time, business was king. And so everything was to service San Francisco. And you got the moles out there at Middle Harbor Shoreline Park, which were just basically depots for passing business and then people back and forth on the train system. And the one thing that really got me was that Carpenter was the first mayor of San Francisco. He was the first mayor. And at the same time he was the first mayor, he was charging people a toll on the bridge across the Lake Merritt Channel. So there was a bridge there, and Carpenter is the guy who put a toll on it and charged the people of Oakland as the mayor. There's something wrong with that picture. But anyway, at that time, everybody did whatever. You got away with whatever you could get away with. You made tons of money, and that's how it went. But anyway, that's the development. And you down to the left there is lower right is a picture of early development of Oakland, and you can see the channel before Mr. Merritt got hold of it. And so Mr. Mayor was the third, I believe, the third mayor. It wasn't really what he wanted to do. He was trained in medicine. He was a doctor. When he came out to chase the gold, he got out here, and of course, he never tasted much of the gold. So he can't continue to be a doctor in San Francisco, but he also had money. So he was able to get into business, and he loved the building business. So he ended up buying a bunch of property on the northwest side of the lake. His house, he built his house there. He did one term as mayor, I think it was 2 years. And of course, they wanted him to stay, but he was making enough money that he didn't have to worry. And so he continued building. He built the Cameron Stanford House, which is down there to the lower right. The last, and he probably built a bunch more, but all those others are gone. This is the last one standing. And that story promulgate why one of the reasons that Lake Merritt became about. As being part of the high society, everybody wanted a mansion on the lake, of course. I'm sure he built quite a few of them. At one of those parties, well, probably at several of those parties. Buckshot flew through the party. Somebody's window got shot out because duck hunters were hunting ducks on the lake. And so everybody, pressured him to do something about it. And so he did. And he, 1869, I think 1868, 1869, he started to campaign to turn the lake into a protected area. And of course, being the past mayor, he gets what he wants. And and he promises to make the lake more navigable. And so he puts up some of his own money with city money to build the first dam on the Lake Merritt Channel. So first name of the lake was Peralta Lake at first, but it became, of course, Merritt's Lake after he put his money into building that channel or building that dam. And you can see the effect in the two pictures, the green pictures of what happened to that channel. So the lake was never really a lake at first. It was originally a slough, which was heavily influenced by the tide. And so you have brackish water there, heavy brackish water, but when you cut that off, then the influence goes down and fresh water moves in, and your brackish water gets weaker because of the influx from the rivers. So that changed the biology there. So did I miss anything in there? Yep, pretty much it.
Clay, we have one question before you move on. If I just want to pass it on in the chat. The question was Carpenter mayor of Oakland or San Francisco?
Oakland.
Okay.
Yeah, he worked in San Francisco when he first got here, and then he thought he would get a hold of the gold. But he was a lawyer. He knew the courtroom. He didn't know getting your hands grubby and putting on boots in the morning. He's not going to do that. Yep. So he was unsuccessful. So he just turned back to lawyering and figured out, okay, so there's land over there that everybody wants, and there were already people squatting on the shoreline of Oakland. They weren't trying to claim anything because they knew it was owned by Peralta. Carpenter knew that, hey, this is now going into American hands. We're going to drag this into court, and we're going to turn this into a business or a city, whichever one you prefer. Anyway, so yep. And so he pushed through the legislation. It became the first and oldest wildlife refuge in the United States. And here's the piece. It hasn't been recognized by the state yet, but it needs to be. And this is where you come in. You guys can write letters and press for state protection. This is it's recognized by Oakland as a protected area, as a wildlife refuge, but it's not fully protected by the state. So I think that's something we need to look into more and make very, very solid. Because right now the nature center isn't open, as most of you know, and they're not going to open it until they feel like they need to. And there's a bunch of groups that are just tearing their hair out, trying to make the city do what should be done, and it hasn't happened yet. So anyway, that's a whole nother conversation that I'm passionate about. But you can see some of the old pictures here of the lake. This is and I tried to find pictures of the old building. They had a building there before the Rotary Nature Center was built, but I haven't been able to find a picture of it. But you can see, look at the wildlife. I mean, look at the waterfowl, just thousands of these pintails and mallards, and it was just amazing. All these birds came here because of that slough. They used the backwaters of these little inlets like San Leandro Bay, Lake Merritt, to rest and rebuild their nutritive deposits. They need to get those energies back up to get ready again for the next migration back north or back east or wherever they're going to go next. But overwintering in those backwaters, eating and sleeping, it's very important for birds. Birds cannot live, they don't build fat very easy. If you have to fly, you can't carry fat around. It's just not something that's a good idea. So these birds have to build their stores, and then once they're ready, take off and use that fat up but if they don't get that at that stopover rate, which is the bay, which is Lake Merritt per se, then they can die. They can literally die. And it doesn't take long for birds to die because they don't have fat stores. So if that's interrupted, these little stations don't exist, then we lose these birds. So this became a big thing back at the turn of the century. Once the lake was there and it was a refuge, of course, all the birds knew it. So they would flock there, and then the people would feed them. And of course, it became a big event, and people would actually come all the way to the lake to watch the feeding of the ducks. It was a phenomena. So pretty amazing stuff. And you wouldn't get that idea now if you go down there, but this is what happened at the turn of the century. And when you create something that protects an organism, the organism knows it. So these are a couple of other milestones along the way. 1915, the islands were built by dredging. So they would dredge the lake because we had an ancient sewer system, which still kind of exists today from what I hear. There's still pieces of it still working, and it's dumping sewage right into the lake. So they've gotten rid of most of it, but still there's stuff. So they dredged all this stuff, and they would pile it up and make these little lakes, little islands. And it was basically to satisfy what people wanted, which was somewhere to paddle their boat and feel like they were somewhere special. They could paddle out to an island and hang out, it was perfect for the birds because these islands protect these birds when they're off land. Not 100%, but it does a real good job for these birds still to this day. Henry Coble was the first, there's another first wildlife naturalist, actually, and I consider myself a naturalist. He was the first naturalist to be paid by the state or by any organization here in the U.S. So he was there for quite a while. He just in the 70s he passed, but his son is still alive and he works down at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. And you can see William Pinmont did quite a bit for the lake as well, for the refuge. Okay. And so where are we now? Here we are now with the lake, and they got the Measure DD. I don't know if pretty sure some of you people heard about the Measure DD. What is that? So many millions of dollars, $198 million. And a lot of that was spent to good effect. You can see some of the plans and some of the effects of swells to catch the oil from the vehicles, a marsh, a wetland area in the channel. The removal of the weirs was a big one because that allowed more tidal influence, which was what it naturally needs. And then it could flush a lot of that sewage out. So once they took out the weirs, that improved water quality. And then now we've got things in there that people haven't seen there in 40, 50 years, like otters, salmon, bat rays, sharks, all kinds of interesting organisms that are coming there to partake of the ecology, which is starting to build. So the water quality has gone up. It's not perfect. I still wouldn't drink that water, but it has gotten a lot better. And so we're seeing more of a higher variety of life or organisms in the lake. It's amazing. There's a softening of the edges of the rocks over here to the left. You can see that that's a slope down to the water. And that's what we need more of, the soft shoulders to the water. We hardscape the entire lake so that we could walk around it and see, I'm standing by the water. But those soft edges, those shallow areas with mud that we don't like to go in, those are the things that an ecology needs. They need those shallow water areas, lots of mud, so that those plant lives can come up. And once those plants come in, the animals follow. So there's a lot more work that needs to be done at the lake, but there is a very good beginning. We've got a lot of good things at the lake with the back offs and the green around the edges. So there's just a few more things that I think would be needed to keep this into a real wildlife refuge with a lot more ecology going on. But that's the situation now. And so what's the future of Lake Merritt? It's going forward. There we go. The future of Lake Merritt is you, right? So get active, write some letters, talk to the Department of Recreation. Why aren't they opening the nature center? Get out there and do some cleaning. Lake Merritt Institute is an amazing organization. They take the kids out and they clean and they pick up stuff, get all the trash out of there. Talk about plant restoration. There's a lot of stuff that can be done to make the lake better, to make it a better refuge. The thing that is amazing to me is that in 450,000 people, this lake, this wildlife refuge has survived. Nobody's been able to convert it. You know, it's actually come out. And the really ironic thing is the reason that the lake came into being was because of hunters, people who eat wild ducks. They were shooting for ducks, and all of a sudden they became the reason that the place was protected. That's pretty interesting to me. But even to this day, even my organization started because of hunting. They were wiping out species of birds on the East Coast, and people were having to go further afield to find these things, and the people had to pay more money for these feathers and all these different things they get from these birds. And somebody said, we need to stop. And that started the Audubon organization. So there you go. Never underestimate a small group of people. I forget how that saying goes, but anyway. So there's that piece. That's the situation of the lake. And now I will switch over to some of the birds that call Lake Merritt home.
At this point, Clay, I wonder if anybody has any questions then about the Lake Merritt piece of the presentation. Feel free. I certainly do.
Okay.
What I see geese around Lake Merritt.
Yes.
Can you tell me, are those Canadian geese? Or what's the story with that?
You're getting ahead of my presentation.
Okay, well then cover it when you get there. Cover it when you get there. I have another really simple question. What do the ducks eat?
Well, ducks eat all types of things. If anybody's ever had a duck, you own a duck, you know they will eat just about anything they can swallow. They're omnivorous, and they'll eat frogs if they can swallow them, and they eat all kinds of seeds from plants. They try to eat just about anything. It's an amazing. They're a very hungry group. Let's put it that way. And you got to really keep up with them. And chickens are a different story. Chickens, you can kind of leave them alone a little. Ducks, you can't leave them alone. You got to clean the water, make sure their water's clean. They have to have water, otherwise they don't do well. And again, keeping those guys fed. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and ducks are delicious.
Sarah Evans here has her hand up.
Okay.
I do. And my question is, I'd always been told that the lake was man-made and maybe woman-made too, but I'm seeing by your presentation that there is a man has adjusted the lake. Do you think we're going in the right direction? And what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, good question. So it was never a lake. It was a slough. So if you look at it in scientific terms, it was either a slough or a marsh.
Okay.
Because of the tidal influence. Once we put the dam there, then that turned it into something that's similar to a lake. But they couldn't just cut off the tidal influence. That wasn't smart. And so it was never really totally cut off. So the water has always been brackish. So I don't think we'll ever, as long as there's people that want to be in San Francisco in the Bay Area, we're never going to see it as a slough again. But we can improve it. And with Measure DD, there was improvements. There's lots of people that say, oh, no, they didn't do much. They, some pretty stuff. But they're looking at the organism, just watching the organisms. I know that water's improved, and there's no way salmon are going to swim into that lake if it's polluted.
Okay.
Once those salmon came through and they tasted, I forget the name of the river, the creek that goes up past Trestle Glen, but once they tasted that, that said something right there. That was like, oh yeah, the water's improved. So there's been an improvement, but it's not. I love things natural, so I want to see it as a salute. But I know people also, and we're not gonna do that as long as we live here. We're not gonna turn it back into a slough. Nobody wants to see mud. That's just, it's kind of like spiders, you know?
Yeah. Thank you.
Clay, there's another question that came in. What is the difference between a slough and an estuary?
Well, estuary covers just the entire package of water bodies that where salt and fresh water meet. So you could call San Francisco Bay an estuary. You can call San Leandro Bay, the little one, an estuary. But a slough is a little bit more specific. It can also be like an extension of a river moving into a saltwater body. So there's a little bit more specificity to sloughs than there is. Estuary is a bigger term.
So Lake Merritt is technically,
it can become called an estuary as well, because there are about 4 or 5 rivers that feed into Lake Merritt. So it is, in technical sense, it is an estuary, but we just call it a slough because it's smaller. It's a little bit smaller. But you know, there's a lot of bleed between these terms. Don't get caught up in that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So
Halfway point, 344.
thank you, sir. We'll switch over to the natural history a little bit. Of course, I work for Audubon, so I would be remiss if I don't talk about birds. And this is a piece I put together for my nature journaling class, which goes year round at Lake Merritt. If you want to, anybody wants to join, we get together once a month and we do a Zoom, a meet or an in-person meeting or Zoom, and then we do a field trip. That's once a month for 10 months. And the whole point of it is to watch the lake, learn about the lake, and see it through the seasons, right? So things change over time. Right now, there aren't any birds on the lake, or very few. But you come back in November, it's all different, right? There's 100, maybe a couple thousand birds on that lake at any one time. So it's learning about the lake. And this little series, is part 1, 2, 3 of the winter birds of Lake Merritt, kind of just give a taste of not all the birds, but most of the birds that you're going to see, particularly in the winter. So here we go. This is the mallard and its close cousin, the northern shoveler. You can see the similarity between the two. But in birding, it's all about visual and sound. And so when you look at those two birds, you see that the heads are green, but the bills are a different color, right? Also, there's a rusty patch on the side of the males and not on the mallard. So on the shoveler, they have this rusty patch, but on the mallard, they don't have that. So these are what we call dabbling ducks. And dabbling ducks have big, long bodies, lots of meat on their body, and the ones that the hunters go after, and they dabble. So dabbling is just what this bird is doing down here, which is dipping their head into the water, but not taking their whole body underwater. So they're tipping their head and sticking their bill down in the mud, and they're catching the microscopic organisms that are in the mud, or the kelp, or whatever plant, or whatever fish that comes along. They'll eat that too, but it's dabbling. And so these ducks are different from the diving ducks. And all these birds are larger bodied. And you would consider also your swans and geese as dabblers, because they don't dive 99% of the time. If they're really freaked out, something like a peregrine falcon's bearing down them, they'll die. But they dive very shortly just to get away, and then they pop back up again. They prefer not to die. And these birds are really important because they are, again, wanting to be in those marshy areas where there's mud and water and you can't go walking, right? And that's one of the reasons they were at the lake, and they're still there and hanging on. But we got to do more for these birds if we want to see them continue to come to Lake Merritt. And that is softening the shoulder of the lake so that we can have our marsh plants there that they come for. They eat a lot of seeds from marsh plants like tule and salicornis, all kinds of different seeds that come from these amphibious plants that we don't have at Lake Merritt right now. So that's, oops, going too fast. Here we go back. Okay, so here's that goose you were talking about, Joe, Canadian goose. What was your question again?
No, it's just that, are they truly Canadian geese, and what direction are they going when we see them? They're going north or south?
Yeah, no, they're not truly Canadian. That was just the name that was stuck. They got stuck with. They are all over the United States. But at the turn of the century, they were being extirpated themselves because there was no bag limit. There was no, oh, you can't take too many. You know, it was like open season. If you wanted to get off grid, nobody cared. You could just walk off into the marsh, get you a boat and a gun, and you could be living out there in a shack forever. Nobody would question anything. If you took 50, you took 100, oh, you're just going to stock up and you'll be good for the rest of the year. Nobody questioned any of this stuff. And people ate these things in the restaurants on a regular basis. You look at a 1800 menu and it would say Northern Shoveler, Scaup, Ruddy Duck, and you have your choice of which duck you wanted to eat. You don't see that anymore because there's such regulation. But these guys were disappearing because they're so big. They have a lot of meat on them, and you could eat one for Thanksgiving, no problem. But once we got the Migratory Bird Treaty Act enacted, that started putting the brakes on these things, and these birds started coming back. They're not stuck. They're not Canadians. They're universals, and they move across the border. They're locally common. So these birds do a shift migration. Once the inland lakes and ponds freeze up, they move out towards the edge, out to the coast and south, so that they can find open water. And once those things break up and spring comes back in, they shift back up to their ponds and lakes up in the middle of the United States and Canada. So they just do a shift migration. And so you'll have your resident population of geese that'll be here year round. And then when winter hits, all the other geese come down, and then they're inundated with all these geese. And you can see that the resident pairs are angry about everything because everybody's here and they can't do what they used to were doing before. And there's just chaos and all this stuff until all the winter till summer hits again, and all the birds go back up to their other places. So we get these birds here year round, the Canada goose, and we see an influx in the wintertime of more. You may or may not see a white-fronted goose on the lake. They come in singly or in groups, small groups. They don't come into the lake on a regular basis. Most of those guys stay inland, and you can go see them at Cosumnes, Wildlife Refuge, Kesterson, those places in the Central Valley. You see more of those guys. Northern Pintail is another amazing duck. It's one of I call it the patent leather shoe of the duck world. It's a beautiful animal. And if you ever get a good up close look at one, it's just stunning the colors. And I'm sure most of these animals don't think about themselves as how they appear to humans. Who cares? But for the ducks and the females, it's pretty spectacular. And it's the biggest duck we have. It's not a goose. It's actually a duck, but it's almost the size of that white-fronted goose. They're pretty good size. A lot of people wonder why the ducks look the way they look, and that's because of the bill. The bill has what we call lamellae in it. It's kind of like the equivalent of baleen in a whale. so that when they open and suck water into their mouth, they squirt it out through this lamellae, and whatever gets caught, whatever microorganisms get caught in the lamellae, they slick it. It's just like squirting water through your teeth. And whatever gets stuck between your teeth, you suck it out and you swallow it. That's how they feed, using the lamellae. So these, like I was saying before, ducks eat all kinds of stuff. Not only do they eat macro things like bread, which you shouldn't feed ducks, but they also eat seeds. They also eat microorganisms. So they find food in all kinds of different ways. And that's why ducks are so successful. Now here's a bird without lamellae, but it's still a duck. And this is the merganser. And the merganser has a bill that went in the other direction. So it got narrow, it developed teeth, and they catch fish. So this is a fishing duck that specializes on fish. And we see them in the lake in the wintertime, and there's two of them, the common, which is bigger, and the redneck, which is smaller, or red-breasted, sorry. So those are ducks, but they're not, they don't look like ducks. And of course, there's the pelican, and the pelican feeds by using a dip net. That big floppy thing on their throat is a net. And when it goes underwater, it expands into about 2 gallons. And it sucks in 2 gallons of water and hopefully a fish. And then they sit there with their head underwater and they squirt the water out. And if there's a fish in there, they swallow it. Now you can watch it next time you go and watch pelicans feed. There'll be gulls around because gulls are pirates. And gulls know that pelicans have to squirt all that water out in order to get their fish. And they'll sit there waiting to see if he makes a mistake and squirts the fish out. And then he'll steal the fish. So gulls are really smart. But that's the pelican. That's the white pelican. There are two. And these are what we call grebes. And grebes are straight fishermen. They are, especially the bigger ones, the two to the right, the Western and Clarks, are mostly after fish. They will take aquatic insects, but their primary goal is to catch fish, and they're underwater swimmers. And the little guy to the right, the piedbill, is our freshwater equivalent. They're really small, and they're residents. So we'll see, again, a large influx of them in the wintertime. But once the winter hits, they disappear, and then their resident pair is left. So when you go out, look for them. They're small and they dive. But if you're patient, you can get a good look at them. And they're called piedbill because the bill is white and black. And they eat lots of insects, these guys. They're small enough that they can get away with the nutritional value of an insect. And not so much the big guys. The big guys need fish. And another fish specialist, the terns, don't eat anything else. They have to have fish. And so in other words, they're dependent on us and our ability to maintain water quality. If fish go away, these birds go away. Most of them are global. Our little least tern up to the upper left there is a special bird. They like to nest in open alluvial fans. In other words, they like to nest where we like to walk. And of course, you know who wins in that equation. So this bird is endangered. If you get a chance to go on the Audubon Birdathon trip over to Alameda, you can get to see this bird nesting open on the open ground. They nest right out in the open. They dig a little divot and they drop their egg, and the baby comes out pretty quickly and is what we call precocial. In other words, they can get up and run around and open their eyes within a day or two. And that's how they survive. But that's the least tern. It's a special bird, and we're lucky to have it here in the Bay Area, considering what we've done to the Bay Area and their habitat. Forster's tern up to the upper right is a bird you'll see most commonly. And of course, we get the big Caspian terns come through. They're almost as big as a gull, and they fly all over the world. But these are straight specialists. They're fishermen and very good at it. All right. Oh, that's the end of that one. Now we'll move on to the next one. Part 2. All right, continuing on. So I talked about dabbling ducks earlier, and here's our diving ducks. Notice the body, short, right? And down below in the middle there, you can see a couple of mallards there. Those are dabbling ducks. And then the divers are in front. Look how small the bodies are. So there's a difference between those two, very much so. Again, these birds take their whole body underwater to catch their prey. Up here to the upper left, there's a what we call a buffle head, and it's got a fish in its mouth. That's not a wire. It's actually a fish. It's called a pipefish, and he's going to swallow that. They eat fish. They'll eat mussels, clams, and some of them will eat vegetable matter, but most of them are after the animals to eat. Again, taking their whole body underwater to catch their food. This one down here to the lower left is a merganser. It's a really special bird. If you get to see one of those, it's amazing. It'll knock your eyeballs out. They're a beautiful bird. And over here to the right is the ruddy duck. With that, ruddy means red. Of course, on the male, they get a really red color. And once you can see them in the spring and winter here in number, in quite high numbers, hundreds of them. But once they get into late spring, the male starts to grow this blue beak. Where they get that from, who knows, but it gets cerulean blue, it's sky blue. It's amazing. And the females follow them and they take off and they go to the happy mating grounds down south. So we only get them in the wintertime here. Once that bill turns blue, they're gone. They take off. We also call them stiff tails because you can see the tail there. Those are diving ducks. Here's some more diving ducks. These are scaup, S-C-A-U-P. And they are, again, these birds come from the north. So they're down here in the wintertime. And for you guys that are more advanced, like Audrey and Celia, you can see the difference between the greater, which has that wide nail on the tip of the bill, and in the lesser, which has a little toenail, a little bitty one. You see that, that's kind of a tail that you've got a greater or lesser. The greaters are all over the north, so we call them circumpolar, all the way around the globe up at the Arctic Circle. You can find them in Russia, America, Greenland, they're all over. But the little lesser, you only find it in Alaska. So it's a smaller bird on average. But if you look at them in the field, it'll drive you nuts. So if you're just beginning, just say scaup, you're good. All right. And you can see also there down here in the middle, there's two different ones that are rare. Once in a while, we get them come in. They're related. One is the ringneck duck, which is over to the left here, and then the tufted duck. And every year we get one tufted duck in the lake. Why he comes, or if it's the same bird, we don't know, but it's always one. This year, I thought I saw the female, but I don't know. I'm not sure. And they look similar to the females of the scaup. So it was really a tricky moment. But every year we get a tufted duck. And the only way you get it is when you see that little funny little hairdo coming off the back. But you got to look hard for it. But these are all, again, diving ducks. Now here's a few more diving ducks. This is what some people would call, or the canvasback. There's a funny name for it called the celery duck, because this bird likes to eat, has a vegetarian diet, likes to eat lots of vegetables. And in turn, it makes its flesh very, very fair. And so all the hunters know that, and everybody wants canvasback. It's a big duck, and it's a very mild meat. So very highly prized by the hunters. And so you'll see, I've seen maybe a dozen, maybe 20 max ever in the lake, but they do come. And another one of the divers, pretty handsome duck. American coot. Most people think it's a duck. It's not. It's not a duck. It's a rail. like the Ridgway's rail, or what else is there? There's most of the rails, the classic rails, don't have a body like this. They have long bill, long beaks. They're kind of skinny in the body, very narrow, and they don't have this funny looking webbing on the feet. You see that webbing, you know you don't have a duck. That's different. Each digit has flanges on it. This is for swimming, basically. And it really makes it hard for them when they're walking. So when they come out of the water, they look like clowns, you know, on clown shoes. But that's the coot, American coot. The closest relative is this bird here, which is the gallinule, or some people say moorhen. It's an old term. But these are rails, and these rails have broken the mold. In other words, they don't just eat like all the other rails will eat insects and clams and all these other things. But this guy here, and they're also hiding. So all these classic rails all over the world hide in the reeds. You hear them before you ever see them. Ridgway's rail is just the same way. It's just we're lucky that we have an area we can go to. If you want to see a Ridgway's rail or a classic rail, you go down to Martin Luther King shoreline and go to Arrowhead Marsh, and there's almost an 80% chance you'll get a good look at a Ridgway's rail. But this rail has broken the mold. It comes out in the open. It doesn't hide, and it actually makes all kinds of noise. It's noisy, and it also eats lots of vegetable matter. So its body is more like a vegetarian. It has a smaller head than your classic rail, and it has a bigger body, which is tell for vegetarianism in the natural world. And again, those funny, weird paddle feet. So that's the American coot. And these guys also are hunted, and everybody was worried that they were going to take over because of all the golf. They love to eat grass, so they come out on the golf courses and eat the grass, and all the golfers hate them. But this bird will survive. It's a pretty tough bird, and they make their way. But again, a coot is not a duck. It's a different kind of animal. This is black-crowned night heron. This is the bird that is now the official bird of Oakland. And Golden Gate Audubon played a major role in making that happen. We worked with a bunch of kids. So back in 2017, the birds were nesting in some trees near the downtown Oakland post office. They decided to build a double level parking garage, and so those trees were in the way. They hired a construction crew who came, knew nothing about birds, and just started cutting the trees down while the babies and the nests were still there. And so babies were hitting the concrete and breaking their necks and splatting all over the place. And of course, it started a whole big old political thing, and people were screaming about it. To the construction company's credit, they paid to try to get the birds relocated out of those trees. But to this day, nobody knows why birds choose the places that they nest. So they tried a bunch of things like playing bird sounds and putting up fake nests and stuff like that, and it didn't work. The birds just moved down across the street and went over by the Oakland Museum. They choose those places, and nobody knows why they choose them, but that was the beginning of what started a campaign to make the black-crowned night heron the official bird of Oakland. So there's your bird of Oakland. He's a little creepy looking, but there he is. And not a very resourceful bird, very resourceful. And you only see them moving generally at night. During the day, they kind of sleep. They're kind of like an owl. So during the day, there's in the trees, and they're kind of hunched over like this, and they don't move much. But once the evening comes, early, if you go down by the lake and walk around, you'll see them down on the edges looking for fish. And they're very intelligent because these birds have been recorded using tools. In other words, using dithers in order to attract fish to catch them. It's pretty amazing stuff. Here's the neck. Most of you see them hunched over. They don't have a neck, but they do. You can see it there. And they use that kind of like a javelin to catch the fish. This is All right. So we'll move on to, well, before I say that, let me say, did I say again? These are the babies here, the chicks that we were scooping up, and Oakland Zoo still comes out and looks for and checks for the chicks on the street. People call them in, you can call them in. And these are juveniles here. These are juvenile. And then, so this is the adult. All right, and is that, I think that's a green heron there. I'm not sure, I can't see. All right, here's the brown pelican, the other one. Exact same photo, but of a different bird, I believe. And a brown pelican is the one that you see diving out of the sky into the water. White pelicans don't do that. The white pelicans will dip their head like a dip net, but these guys dive out of the water and open their mouth underwater to catch the fish. So pretty amazing stuff. These are grebes, more grebes. As I was showing before, the fishermen, the underwater divers that chase the fish. And they're really, for birders, it's a real challenge when you get into the identification of the winter plumage. So you'll see birds like these in the winter will have a different set of feathers as opposed to when they're in their breeding. So we get them when they're looking kind of scruffy most of the time. Right now, the ear grebes are breeding, and so you can see them occasionally. We'll see an individual that looks like this with that gold color. It's really a beautiful bird. And the magenta. Horn grebes don't breed here. I'm sorry, this is the ear over here. Horn grebes don't breed here, but the ear grebes do. So most of the time we see them, they're looking like this, kind of in their winter plumage. But in the spring, the ear grebe, you can see it looking like this if you're lucky. And down at the bottom is the red-necked grebe, which is a bird we don't get in the lake very much, but they will be out in the estuary. So you can catch them in San Leandro Bay or in the Lake Merritt Channel. You can see these guys. That's the red-necked grebe, and they're kind of an intermediary between the western grebe and these smaller grebes. All fish specialists or aquatic invertebrates. And another fisherman is the hooded, the one I pointed out before. This bird is amazing. Look at that. I mean, you can't create something like that any better. I mean, it's just takes your breath away. They're a quiet water bird. In other words, they like the backwaters. And so we do get them on the lake, luckily. They'll hang around the islands, and usually it's in one or twos. So you really got to keep your eyes peeled to get a good look at one of these. And I can't think of a place more that's reliable for them, but they're there. You can also find them in Golden Gate Park at Stowe Lake. I've seen them up there too. So they're adaptable, but they're just not, you don't see them in flocks. They're just one, twos, that's about it. Right, it's a hooded merganser. And then some more terns. Elegant tern is an occasional visitor, comes in a little bit smaller than the Caspian. Another one of the fishing specialists. And these birds are really noisy. So in the wintertime, you hear a bunch of birds going quack, quack, quack. It's usually elegant tern. Again, unusual. They kind of look like the Caspian, but they have the hair that comes off the back, or feathers that come off the back. That kind of tell you, and they have a kind of a white ball pate on the forehead. So they're a little bit different. Another one of the specialists. Then we get to our shorebirds. Now, shorebirds are different from aquatic or diving birds. They spend their time around the edges, as the name implies. And this one is really unusual. It's the spotted sandpiper, and they always are single. And if they're a pair, they're far apart. You only see them singly, especially down here. They're what we call a clino-migrant. In other words, in this area, when the snows hit the Sierras, these birds take off and they come down to the lower elevation in order to feed. They'll spend the winter down here, and when they're down here, they just look just like this, kind of plain. They're very small, so you can very easily miss them if you're not looking for them. They walk along the rocks, they walk along the edge of the water, and they do a little funny dip dance with their butt. So you see a bird dipping its butt in the air like that, doing kind of a bouncy thing, you probably got a spotted sandpiper. In the spring, they head back up into the Sierras. You don't see them down here at all. Head back up to what is that marsh area up there? Tuolumne Meadows. They head back up there and then they breed. And when they breed, they change their plumage to this spotted coloration. And so going from the marsh up to the high elevation tarns and the meadows up there, and that's where they breed. So it's a clinomigrant, spotted sandpiper. And then this is our gulls. These are the Swiss Army knives of the shorebird world. They try all kinds of different things. They study you. They literally do, and they figure out how to take advantage of you. So if you're a sloppy eater and you leave your stuff out, they know it. If you always go out at lunchtime and you stop by this one spot, they time it and they wait. And if you leave anything out, they'll take advantage of it. These guys eat all kinds of stuff. They rob nests. They eat baby birds. They'll eat smaller birds. They don't care. Fish, insects. They've figured out how to take clams and fly up in the air over the walkway and drop them at just the right height so that they crack. And then they come down and they eat the insides out. So these guys are really, really intelligent, on the level of a crow. And we have three. Gulls are a whole different world in the bird world. And a lot of guys won't tackle because they interbreed. And they also, it takes 3 or 4 years before they become adults. And they go through these whole plumage molts. Each year, they have a different cycle. And so you got to figure out the year, how old it is, and you got to figure out what cycle it's in. And is it a hybrid? Is it not? Is it an adult? Is it a first year? Is it a third? So it's a whole nother level of stuff that a lot of people just don't want to deal with. But there's hope. If you just remember 3 birds, I only have 2 up here because these are migrants. One of them is the California gull, which is on the left there with the 3-color bill, yellow, red, and black. And if you get that, California gull. Over on the right is the ringbill gull. It has a ring around the bill, right? Easy. And then the third one is the western gull, which I don't show here, but it has a big yellow bill with just a red spot. So if you get the adults and you see that color bill, and if you say one of the 3, you're 50% right. So just do that and you'll be okay. So that's the gulls. We call them gulls. We don't call them seagulls because some gulls don't spend much time on the ocean at all. Actually, the California gull nests on fresh water up the Columbia River and some of its tributaries. It doesn't nest on the ocean at all. We'll visit the ocean in the off season, but otherwise they are on fresh water, and we find them at the lake all the time. I think that's the last one in this one. Yes. So we'll jump out of this one and go to our last one. How are we doing for time? Are we over?
Well, it's 4:15. We're accustomed to going till 4:30.
Okay.
Question.
So I'm still safe. Very good. And we got one more. There we go. And this one will be the last one. Okay. So in this one, I'm just talking a little bit about the migration routes. In the United States, we have 4 major migration routes: the Eastern or Atlantic Flyway, the Mississippi or Central Flyway, the Mississippi Flyway, and then the Central Flyway, which is over the Rocky Mountains. And then there's the Pacific Flyway, which we are in. So cinnamon teal, these are dabbling ducks, long body, big body, and the long neck. So these are dabblers, and they're small. All the teals are really small. You can hold them in your hand. They're really small ducks, but they're beautiful. You can see that cinnamon is just amazing. And we get those guys here in the winter. And here's the green winged teal and the blue winged teal. And you can see over to the right how small they are by the guy's hand holding one. So these are all dabbling ducks that need that shallow water. And of course, the teal is referring to the teal on the wing. You can see the diagram there in the middle. All of the teals have the bluish, some kind of a blue teal on the wing. And these birds were also collected for their feathers. So they were hunted for their meat and their feathers as well. These are some diving ducks, and these are golden eye, we call them, obviously because of the golden eye. And we get the barrels and the common. Because of once the weirs were taken out, it's changing the water chemistry. And for some reason, we're not getting as many of the golden eye on the lake anymore. It used to be quite a few, and now it's changed. So something in the biotic community has changed, and these birds don't come into the lake as often as they used to. But both these birds are from the north. They winter up north in Alaska and in Canada. Willets, this is a shorebird, obviously. And really can't say too much about willets other than that they're very versatile. And we see them usually in the very plain color. Right now they're in their breeding plumage, which is that speckled coloration. So one telltale about willets is that they have this, when they open their wings up, you see that very high contrast, black and white. None of the other shorebirds have that. So if you see that, you know you've got a willet. They're very common around. They spread out over the shore. They don't share the shore very much. They're not good at it, so you'll see them fight a lot. But once they get ready to migrate, then they group up. When they come in, they're grouped up, and then they spread out. And then when they're ready to leave again or head back north, they flock up again. But again, they eat all kinds of different things, lots of wide variety of foods. But that's the willet, a gray shorebird. These are the little peeps people call them. Just, oh, they're peeps. That's good enough. Thank you.
I'm upstairs, Louise, listening to a presentation.
Oh, somebody's speaking. I can hear you. These are the Western sandpiper to the right and our little least sandpiper to the left. And these guys are really small. I mean, tiny little guys at 0.7 ounces. I mean, just tiny, but very resilient. They can fly. They fly all up and down the West Coast, some all the way down to South America. And these guys can eat a lot of, they just discovered that they eat these microscopic things in the sand. So they put their bill in and they use it like a straw, and they suck up the water and filter out these tiny microscopic organisms. So they're getting food from the stuff they're walking on. It's pretty amazing stuff. Down below to the lower right is the dunlin. As you can see, the black patch on the belly, it's a different one. And in the middle, there's a godwit, the big, tall bird. These birds don't come into the lake because we've kind of done away with the shore. We've hardscaped it so we can walk on it. So these birds don't have anywhere to really feed in the lake. So the only ones you'll see in the lake are the spotted sandpiper and the least sandpiper. These sandpipers can, because they're so tiny, they don't have a problem coming in on the rocky shore and figuring it out. But most of the other sandpipers, we haven't left them any space to be in the lake. So you won't see most of them here. Moving on to the land, if you ever get a chance to go over to Lake Merritt, the gardens there, those gardens are amazing. There's some public pots there, but there's also a lot of permanent installations, horticultural installations that are pretty cool. And so the birds hang out there quite a bit, and a wide variety of them, like the hermit thrush here. Hermit thrushes are, I wish I had this music to play you, but they use two syrinxes. We have one voice box. They have two syrinxes, a bird equivalent of voice boxes, and they can work them at the same time. So you get this eerie two calls working together, and it's unforgettable. If you go to Birds of the World and check out, you can actually hear it.
Why do you have a raw chicken on the table?
There's a raw chicken on the
That
table.
is thawing.
Can't have raw chicken on the table. Hello. All right. Yellow rump warbler. This is a bird that is here year round, but in high numbers in the winter. Most warblers are really hard to see. You really have to work at it to see warblers because they're so little and they're always moving. So once you get a beat on them, they're gone. So you have to be really into it to get into warblers. But this is one of the few, and it's the butter rump. We call it the yellow rump or butter rump warbler because it has a yellow rump. And you can see that right up here on the female, right there. So when they open their wings, you can see it. Otherwise, you don't. You get this gray bird in the wintertime, which you go, well, whatever. That's an LBB. Okay, good enough. But the males and the breeding birds are pretty spectacular. They have really intense coloration. And we get them both here, but more so the Audubons. They've lumped them together now, so they're now all called yellow rump. So, and then somebody will come along and split them up again, maybe. Then we've got the beautiful cedar waxwing, which is a very like a vagabond. They come down in the wintertime looking for seeds and fruit. They follow the fruit harvest. So wherever the fruit is, that's where they go. These are frugivores. They eat insects too at breeding season, but off season, it's mostly all about the fruit. And wherever that is where they go. So they don't really have a place that they stay over winter. They're continuously moving. If you're lucky enough to have a tree that they want to have the fruit off of, you get to hear them in their high-pitched call. And they really do have wax on the wing. It's a sebaceous fluid that comes from their body that makes those red dots. Why that's happening is still a mystery, or why they do that, who knows. But they do have a wax drop on the wing, or sebaceous fluid that's on the wing, and it makes that red dot. So that's the name waxwing. These are silky flycatchers, very gregarious, and because of the nature of their food, they have to be together in order to take advantage of the crops. Individual birds, it's not going to be good for survival if just a couple of birds get it and the other birds don't get it. So these birds go in groups. They're very tight knit in the off season, and they find the fruit that way. It's more a survival strategy. All right, and we got ruby crown kinglet here in the wintertime. You don't see the ruby crown unless you're watching very close and they get upset about something. Then you see the little fire come out. But otherwise, they keep it covered, and they look just like a little LBB. One of the birds they really look like, and this is for advanced birders, is that they look like a Hutton's vireo, which is this bird to the right here. Looks just like it, but there's some tells about it, and I won't go into it here. But that's ruby crown, and they're pretty feisty little bird. We also get the what I call the forest sparrow. This is the dark-eyed junco. Most sparrows like grassland. They like to be out in the grass in the open areas, and that's why they have the brown coloration. The Oregon junco has gone another direction. It lives on the forest floor. And when you see one of these birds on the forest floor, it's hard to see them because of that black cap or those dark colorations. They use the shadows to their advantage. And so they're not attacked as easily when they're in the shadows. This bird stays on the ground. It's got a pretty calm temperament. They eat lots of seeds, just like most sparrows. Will take insects, and will come to feeders as well. So, but you can see there's a variety of them all over the United States. We get the dark-eyed species, which is up to the middle here in the front. And one of the tells again is that liver-colored bill. So if you see a black cap with a kind of a flesh-colored bill in the middle, you know you've got a junco. All of them have that, except for this species, this subspecies here. All the rest have that flesh-colored bill. It's a sparrow. It's a forest sparrow. And here are some of the grassland sparrows I'm speaking of. Golden crown sparrow, which is you can see the gold on the crown. and then the white-crowned sparrow. This is a winter migrant. We have a resident population here, but the winter migrants come in also, and they have a yellow bill. So look for that yellow bill, and you know you've got a white-crowned sparrow. If it doesn't have a yellow bill, you know you've got to go brown generally. They're both about the same size. Golden crowns are in small flocks. They only see about a dozen of them at a time, and they're usually moving up on the hills. They will come down low like the white crown, but usually they're in more drier areas. And the hummingbirds. Hummingbirds, of course, are irresistible. They're the only bird that can fly backwards. For their size, they're the fastest flying bird on the planet. They're pretty quick. We get the Anna's hummingbird here year round. It has green all over its body. So up here to the upper left, you can see a female, and down below it is the male. And that thing on their face is called the gorget. And they are the only ones that have a gorget over the eye. So on the forehead, the gorget goes up over the forehead. Whereas on these other species, the Allens, you see gold and orange in the body. And in the, I forget the name of it. Do I have it there? Anyway, there's two more, and they both have more gold in their body than anything. When you see gold in the body, you know you've got a different species. But if there's no gold, it's a Allen or Anna's hummingbird here. Okay, and I think I've covered everything. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Clay. Shall we open it up? Any questions?
Sure.
Sarah, I thought you had a question about native plants or something. You're still on mute, Sarah.
Going back to your earlier chapter on how it's been a long time since there's been a native plant. I was curious because, you know, the nurseries offer native plants which survive in our contemporary, that it's better to have a native plant than to transplant something from somewhere. So how far back do you think our native, quote, native plants go actually?
Oh, I mean, how long have they been in?
How long, in other words, those native plants that were really native to our area, sounds like they've been long gone.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
You know,
no, I'm talking about the plant set that was prior to the grazing. So when the Spanish
okay.
came in and brought in the cattle, that changes everything. When you have a big 600 pound animal walking and eating everything in its path over again, you know, they're confined to certain areas. They're going to eat the same vegetation until it's gone. Then you destroy the ecology. The ecology is disrupted. And so that happened, but there was nobody like John Muir to come in and say, oh, there's this succession, right? There's these plants that were here prior to that interruption. So we don't have that knowledge. It's not written down anymore. So that's what I'm referring to. And if we can come back to some simple, and I'm only talking about this because this is a refuge, right? And we want to have those native plants that those birds were feeding on in order to maintain that wild state. So that was interrupted, and if we can, maybe we can build something back that's similar. It'll never be what it was because we don't have that knowledge. And the Native Americans that did have that knowledge they're gone.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions before?
Joan has one.
Good.
You're on mute.
When I walk around the lake, I see a lot of egrets. You haven't mentioned them, and also cormorants. And I'm wondering if they're out of season, and that's why you didn't mention them.
Oh, those were residents. So most of the cormorants are resident. You can find them here year round. They used to nest here, right? They had a nest. They had a colony in the tree there. Why they abandoned it, nobody knows. Birds do that though. They can get spooked. Like the other day, I was doing a talk at the lake, and a peregrine landed in that tree. well, that's going to spook any colony of birds. So you never know what's going to cause a colonial nestor to stay or go. So,
And the egrets are resident as well?
yes. And
Okay.
I did mention the great horn, the great little green heron, or no, the night heron.
The night herons, right, but the
Oh,
egrets, white, yeah.
they're all year round. They're all year round birds.
And I have one more question. When I lived in Florida, we called the cormorants anhinga. What's the difference between anhingas and cormorants?
So an anhinga is a modified type of cormorant. It's gone to fresh water only. It spends its time in small bodies. You're never going to find it on the ocean. And they're a lot more aquatic than cormorant. If you can imagine a bird more aquatic than a cormorant, that's the anhinga, right? And so again, that's a really specialized. It's like you can look at it like a specialized cormorant.
Okay, but we don't have them.
No, unfortunately, I wish. That's a super bird. Yeah,
Okay.
Florida. I think Florida and Louisiana or something like that. They're not here at all.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll get our cormorants back someday.
Audrey, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, Clay, I want to thank you for a very interesting talk. That was just great. I loved your stories about the history. It really made it real, which was great. And I
Yeah.
also liked it in many other ways, but also how you showed the two little grebes next to one another, the eared and the horned.
Yes.
Because in the wintertime, it really, for me, they're very hard to tell apart.
Yes, they are. For me
And
too. Sometimes.
I think you really helped by
Yeah.
showing them.
Great.
So thank you
You're welcome. You're welcome.
very much.
This is just some of the organizations that I'm kind of connected to. Some of the Native Americans, they now have restaurants. If you want to taste Native American food, go to Macam. I don't know even how they say it, but they're associated with the University of Berkeley, and they're really traditional in how they make their food. And then there's Wapepa's Kitchen, which is just down in the Fruitvale district, and they're serving Native American style food for Native American buffs. And there's the Mwekma website, which is pretty cool. It has lots of good information on it. Anyway, yeah, so I'm glad every folks got something out of it. And again, I would implore you to call the city of Oakland and say something about getting our nature center open so we can, get in there and do more programs, because we want to have our nature center functioning and working. So thank you everyone for listening to my babble.
No, Clay, it's been our pleasure. Thank you very much for this. Can I ask you, do you at all work with the Oakland Heritage Alliance, perhaps in adding pressure on the Cal legislature, whomever might decide about the wildlife refuge?
What was it again, though? The what?
There's an organization in Oakland called the Oakland Heritage Alliance, and it mostly deals with buildings and in Oakland and all. But they have some influence, and it seems like that might be in their bailiwick to pressure Sacramento and some kind of recognition.
Okay, Oakland Heritage Alliance.
Right.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, any other questions before Audrey?
I just wanted to thank you and Craig for making this thing run smoothly. You did a great job, and thanks.
Well, thank you, Audrey. You're the one that I believe gave us the reference name for Clay. So
well, I saw him. I've seen him in action. He's really good.
well,
Oh yeah, Audrey works with my eco ed program. She comes out and works with the kids and has a great time. So we have a really good time doing that. You've been doing that for, I don't know, over a decade now, I think. Is that right, Audrey?
I didn't hear that last.
Oh, I said you did eco ed for about a decade.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, super pleasure for me all these years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pleasure having you.
Okay, so again, thank you very much, Clay, with this.
Yeah.
Thank you for donating your time. We really do appreciate it.
I'm glad. I'm just, if anybody gets anything out of it, that's a success. So
It is.
thank you guys.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.